Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 30th day of December, 2021. I'm David Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. And up first on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got starting up north, wind chill advisories out for the western Arctic coast, the northwest coast, and the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref area down through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. All under the influence of a wind chill advisory for tonight through Friday morning for wind chills of 55 degrees below zero. And let's see, down to the south there, winter weather advisory for tonight for the Yukon Delta. 4 to 6 inches of snow, total accumulations in some areas there with winds of 20 to 35 miles an hour in gusts. Will create visibilities down to quarter mile or less, or half mile or less at times. And that's for tonight, and then condition improve by tomorrow morning. Then off to the east there, the watch area, the Alaska Range, that's a winter storm watch for Friday night through Saturday, as winds expect to be a big increase in north winds there, gusting to 60 miles an hour, much colder air coming in on those north winds. So wind chills will be falling to 60 degrees below zero in throughout the Alaska Range, especially through the passes. And that's for north winds, as opposed to usually see that for south or southeast winds. And moving on down to the eastern North Gulf Coast, all of the panhandles under a heavy snow watch, and that is for the time frame Friday through Friday night, tomorrow through tomorrow night, New Year's Eve. 6 to 16 inches of snow possible across the entire area there. With a storm coming in, cold air coming down, wrapping around, should looks like possibly drop snowfall levels down to sea level. Have a little trouble there on the south coast though, but just a watch, meaning the potential for, again, heavy snow ranging from 6 to 16 inches. And from there, moving on to satellite imagery. That's an old slide there I forgot to take out. Anyway, current satellites, so those are from today. You can see a pretty good storm system moving into the south central Bering Sea. Front very evident there, having pushed across the Pribilofs and making a pretty good jog to the east-northeast. Looks like a triple point low pressure area developing there in Bristol Bay, western Bristol Bay. The front trailing back along the Alaska Peninsula and pushing past the eastern Aleutians. And then the flow from the northwest back to the west of the center there toward AKwx. Pretty gusty winds with that system. Winds southwest, west-southwest today, gusting 60 miles an hour at AKwx. And then out of the east, over at Cape Newenham, ahead of the frontal boundary there, we're gusting about 60 miles an hour, otherwise 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts occurring along the southwest coast, and a little bit less than that in over the inland areas of Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And some rain finally moving into Kodiak Island this afternoon. Clouds on the increase, especially the mid and high level clouds, northern Cook Inlet, thickening up a little down toward Kamishak Bay. But Copper River Basin below zero, clear skies, mostly clear skies, staying below zero all day. Temperatures really taking a fall from what they were just a couple of days ago. And especially up to the north, below zero through much of the interior there. And especially the north slope to the Arctic coast, seeing below zero temperatures, gusty winds, let's see, as high as 35 to 40 or 45 miles an hour out of the northeast across St. Lawrence Island. Temperatures around 5 below or so there. It's Gamble. Panhandle, not too bad. On the chart today, you can just see some variable clouds there. The action back to the west, low pressure 985 millibar low pulling north of the Pribilof, still under some more mild south winds there for rain showers. And then rain changed to showers, kind of tapered off for the Fox Islands. Rainfall amounts were not all that impressive. About, let's see, 0.2 of an inch fell at Igagik. Seemed to be heaviest up over the northeast Bristol Bay and around the Aleutian Range area, although AKwx did pick up about a tenth. These are a tenth of an inch. These are 12-hour amounts, and more of a showery condition there. And St. Paul also had about a tenth of an inch of precipitation, so not a big precipitation producer at this point. A little bit more on the wind side there, especially on the back side of that. They got storm force northerlies there over the western Bering Sea, about to move down into the AKwx area. Areas of light snow up in the interior, especially along the trough axis there. About an inch fell last 12 hours at Nenana, 1 to 3 inches in the greater Fairbanks area there, up to about the White Mountains. And then just areas of flurries and low clouds up along the north slope to the Arctic coast, and some breaks, as I mentioned, over the Panhandle. And it's mostly clear over the Copper River Basin, and a little bit of snow shower activity possible there. Actually, there was some from Tin City up to Shishmaref. Tin City, pretty gusty north winds up to about 40 miles an hour, temperature below zero, putting the wind chills far below zero. For tonight, low pressure tracks into the western Gulf of Alaska. The parent low drifts eastward there, almost over the Pribilofs, actually a little bit to the east-southeast of St. Paul, St. George. Weakens to 990 millibars, and cold air coming down around that. Will start to mix the precipitation in with snow again for AKwx and ATKA. Snowfall levels lowering, and it'll take a little longer for the Pribilofs, but notice the increase in those northeast winds over the northern Bering Sea. Much colder air coming down, riding in on those winds. Stays mostly cloudy or variably cloudy to mostly cloudy over the eastern interior, but snowfall really tapering off as that low center nudges some moisture northward. Look for areas of snow to push into southern Alaska, mixing with rain out toward the coastline. Chance of moisture reaching the north coast of the Panhandle late tonight, otherwise just increasing clouds. And moving ahead to Friday, low pressure. That low pressure kind of stalls out there in the western Gulf as the other one crosses the Alaska Peninsula, and then it'll start to kind of dive to the southeast a little bit. Cold high pressure and over the north slope, temperature staying in the 30 to 40 degree below zero range even throughout the afternoon, or 25 to 40 below. And north to northeast winds quite cold over the St. Lawrence Islands, bringing colder air into the Yukon Delta. And snowfall levels falling to sea level tomorrow or tomorrow afternoon for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Rain and snow North Gulf Coast. Rain and snow the outer coastline of the Panhandle, otherwise snow with any elevation at all, especially over the northern areas. And for Saturday, winter storm watch out for the eastern North Gulf Coast and Panhandle. Again, 6 to 16 inches of snow. Winter storm warning for low wind chills and gusty winds to 60 miles an hour or better. You can see a very tight gradient there across southeast Alaska, Kodiak Island. Much colder air coming back in, and well below zero western northern interior, but lighter winds out that way. Light winds over the eastern Bering Sea, and then storm force winds pushing into the far western Aleutians ahead of that next system due to the gradient between the low pressure areas to the west and then the strong high pressure area there over the eastern Bering Sea. Lows tonight, 25 to 40 below for the north slope, maybe even a shade colder than 40 below in some areas, but mid-minus 20s for the central interior. The 0 degree isotherm there from the Copper River Basin up along the Alaska Range, cutting across the Yukon Delta. Above zero to the south, single numbers in teens, Kuskokwim Delta, mid to upper 20s Bristol Bay, 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid-30s for the Aleutians and Kodiak Island, and in the teens for south central Alaska, teens northern Panhandle, 20s to the south. Highs tomorrow in the 20s to mid-30s for the southeast coast, near 40 again for Kodiak Island, lower 30s Bristol Bay, lower 40s, upper 30s, lower 40s for the Aleutians. Colder for St. Paul, high near freezing tomorrow, 9 below your high for St. Lawrence Island, and below zero north of the Alaska Range, staying well below zero for the Brooks Range out to the north slope areas, followed by lows 35 to 45 below for interior Alaska, and 10 to 15 below out toward the Bering Strait coast. Below zero, Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, 0 to 5 below. Teens for Kodiak Island as that cold air comes rushing in on those strong northwest winds. And right around 20 for the Alaska Peninsula, and low near 20 for the Pribilofs, and milder there for the Panhandle. And then the highs Saturday afternoon, upper 20s to upper 30s for the southeast coast, well below zero north and west of the Alaska Range, except Bristol Bay, 0 to 5 for your highs, and upper 20s for the Pribilofs, lower 40s over the western Aleutians, otherwise lower to mid 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid 30s for the Fox Islands. Central interior looking about 15 to 30 below for the high temperatures, and all the way out to the Arctic coast, 15 to 25 below zero. Otherwise, Kodiak Island, mid-20s for your highs. Again, very strong northwest winds. Could see gusts 65 miles an hour out of the northwest there, with even higher gusts out of the eastern bays of the coast, and also from the north or the Copper River Delta as well. Heavy freezing spray likely, with winds gusting maybe to 70 miles an hour in some areas.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Weather, we've got some marginal VFR central north slope across the Brooks Range there, southeastward across the Yukon Flats down along the Yukon River, either side, including Eagle, and then narrow band of VFR right from, well, in the upper Tanana Valley. IFR, a pretty good band there from Atka Island up across the Purbloffs into the southwest coast, across the Kuskokwim Valley and the Alaska Range, south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, and along the North Gulf Coast, and then marginal VFR for Yakutat and VFR for the Panhandle. And moving on to the afternoon forecast, that IFR kind of rearranges itself and splits in half, with a big portion into the Panhandle and the eastern North Gulf Coast, eastern Prince William Sound, on up into the Copper River Basin. Another one along the Alaska Range, back down into the Susitna Valley, and part of the Kuskokwim Valley, especially the western Alaska Range on down across the Aleutian Range, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, western Kodiak Island. Next batch of IFR moving into Chimay-Attu with marginal VFR eastward to Kiska Island. Up to the north, not too bad. It's got some marginal VFR there for the Brooks Range, central and western Brooks Range, and Arctic Slope, western Arctic coast, and pretty good for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. And for Saturday morning, more widespread VFR, as you can see, over the Bering Sea and from Amchitka Island eastward right into Bristol Bay, Iliamna Lake, Kamishak Bay, Kodiak Island starting out VFR for the day Saturday morning. And northward through the Bering Strait, looks like just about nothing but VFR right on up to about Point Ley. Otherwise, North Slope, Arctic Coast, marginal VFR, including the Brooks Range. Narrow band of IFR along and north of the Alaska Range there, cutting across the Nenana Fairbanks area up into the Chena Ridge, the general Chena area there, Chena Hot Springs, eastward to Eagle, or northeastward there. Marginal VFR, southern Alaska, Cook Inlet, North Gulf Coast, some IFR around Yakutat, and then IFR for the Panhandle. For the afternoon, IFR for the southeast coast and all the way up to Yakutat, eastern Copper River Basin, Wrangell Mountains, northward, Nabesna, Northway, Tok, just south of Eagle, marginal VFR to the north there to the Yukon River, and westward into the mid-Tanana Valley, and then down along the northwestern Alaska Range, Denali Park area. But good VFR to the north and northwest there, eastern Bering Sea, Purbloff still VFR, Atka eastward, actually Adak eastward, VFR into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, looking really good. And then IFR building farther out to the west there across Chimay-Attu, and the southwest Bering Sea kind of streaming off to the north and northeast. Passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR. Go VFR for Adigan, better off to the east there. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR. Rainy, IFR. Windy, IFR. And Isabel, IFR. Mentasta, IFR. And to break the chant here, marginal VFR for Tanita, marginal for Portage, and then back to IFR for Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, and then off the southeast coast. Icing-wise, areas of moderate rime icing, or considerable moderate rime icing, areas of from the North Gulf Coast and along the south coast of the Panhandle, especially Sitka on down toward Heidelberg, Prince of Wales Island, with lighter icing amounts, more very isolated moderate, and more areas of kind of location there back toward Bristol Bay, up into the southern interior and southeast interior, and then next push of icing out west coming into Chimay-Attu. And for the jet stream, that getting pushed along by about 120 knot jet there, just northwest of Attu Island, taking a turn to the southeast, 110 knots there across Atka Island, upper level low right over Bristol Bay, cold upper level low up there over the western North Slope and Brooks Range area, southwest flow, 115 knots in toward Yakutat, coming over the top of the ridge just south of the Panhandle. And at 9,000 feet, upper level trough there from the upper Yukon Valley southeastward, with upper level low there crossing Bristol Bay. Northerly flow behind that, northeast flow, cold northeast flow up over the northwest part of the state turned northerly and then increased to 50 knots as it approaches the eastern Aleutians. And turbulence looking pretty bumpy for the Panhandle, northwest part of the state, and the Fox Islands.
Trace here, star friends, and this week I was looking at my astronomy calendars and I saw super new moon, and I thought, what is that? A supermoon is a big looking moon, and this is because its orbit is slightly oblong, so sometimes it appears a bit larger in the sky, thus supermoon. But this week is also a new moon, the phase when the moon isn't visible to us. So this week is a non-visible supermoon, which may be hard to get excited, except new moons mean dark sky. Hit the darkness to find Perseus in the northeast under Cassiopeia's chair. His chest is bright merfolk, and next to it is Medusa's evil eye, Algol. You might wonder why we'd need to know about a super new moon, other than a dark sky. Supermoons, even the dark ones, mean that the tides at some point on the Earth are called king tides. They're at their highest point. Enjoy the super new moon, my kings and queens, and keep looking up.
The Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge is a refuge in Alaska. It's the third largest refuge in the National Wildlife Refuge system. North of Fairbanks, it's a vast ecosystem of wetlands. What drives this refuge are natural forces of fire, ice, and water.
The Yukon Flats has got a really interesting history. Back in the late 50s, early 1960s, there was a proposal to dam the Yukon River down by Rampart, which is downstream of the Yukon Flats. And it was a hydroelectric proposal. And so in order to assess the merits of that proposal, people got together because they were a little bit concerned about what the impacts might be on the Yukon Flats, the habitat, and all the people living within the Yukon Flats Refuge. There's quite a few people living within the refuge. We have 7 villages. So in order to figure out how special the Yukon Flats was, the Fish and Wildlife Service banded over 40,000 ducks within the Yukon Flats. And using the band return information, they found out that those ducks were using 45 of the 50 lower 48 states. They were using 7 foreign countries, and they were using most of the provinces over in Canada, as well as all the major flyways down in the lower 48. And so that identified that the Yukon Flats was a special breeding area, and that information, along with a lot of other public information that was gathered during that whole process, really ensured that the dam never did go in, and thus the habitat was preserved.
So what that did is it really highlighted the national importance of this area and how important conserving this particular area is for conserving many other natural areas in the lower 48 and even across the continent.
To protect the Yukon Flats Refuge because we have responsibility towards our future generations to leave land protected in the state that it is now. The Yukon Flats is a wild place. The ecosystem is intact and functioning, and you can't find that very many places in the rest of the U.S.
The Yukon Flats Refuge is among the most important places for ducks. So each spring, millions of ducks, and in addition to shorebirds and geese, raptors and loons, they all fly to the refuge to nest and rear their young. And the reason they are attracted to this area is because it has really enriched wetlands. There are lots of nutrients in the wetlands that provide a lot of food for the growing young.
We also have a lot of predator, prey species like bears and black bears, grizzly bears, wolves. We also have a lot of moose and fur bearers that use the refuge. So overall, there's just a great diversity of both upland, lowland, and migratory bird species that use the refuge.
Most people know the flats as a duck nursery, and that was one of the main purposes that was designed for, but a lot of recent research over the last decade has really illustrated how important it is to a variety of native endemic fish species for subsistence and recreational and commercial fisheries throughout the entire Yukon River Basin and out to supporting commercial fisheries out to the Bering Sea as well. So it supports a variety of different whitefish and salmon species, the northern pike, a little bit of everything that people rely on as cultural identities, but also for subsistence resources and where people go to recreate and enjoy being outside.
The type of recreation that you're going to find on Yukon Flats Refuge is very primitive. And what that often does is it gives people a complete break from some of the stresses of today's world. There are no cell phone towers out there. There are no roads. There are no trails. So any type of recreation that people have is entirely natural. The lands and waters within the Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge are open to the public to enjoy. And that's a really important tenet upon which the United States is built.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Taking a look at the sea ice analysis from December 19th. That was about the farthest extent we had this season in the ice before the warm spell took over in the Bering Sea. And then comparing that to today's analysis, you can see how far back it went. Let's see, there we go. You can see it really took a beating back almost to the Yukon Delta coastline around Nunivak Island and pushing back up toward, but not quite reaching St. Lawrence Island. And that's about the extent. It's already turned around. Strong north winds kicked in last night or late yesterday. St. Lawrence Island temperatures back below zero, and big cold push of air will come down through the Bering Sea. So expecting the ice edge to make a significant jog to the west and southwest over the next few days, possibly pushing farther than it did on the 19th. And for the coastal water forecast, gale warnings, pretty easy one. Along the coast, southeast winds 35 knots, seas 12 to 14 feet. Lynn Canal, north winds 15 knots, 3-foot seas, southeast 20, gusts 35 knots for Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories for Clarence Strait, southeast winds 25 knots, seas 10 feet. And for Saturday, southeast 20 for Clarence Strait, but small craft advisories, winds picking up, cold outflow winds beginning to blow through Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, gale force winds 35 knots. Stevens Passage northeast at 30 knots. Small craft advisories for the north coast, east winds 30 knots, and 15 to 20 knot winds from the south-southwest for the south coast. Prince William Sound, small craft advisories for Friday. Northeast winds 25 knots, seas 4 feet. Small craft advisories for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Southeast winds at 30 knots, north 25 for the western North Gulf Coast, southwest 25 for the Barren Islands. Southern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories. North winds 25 knots, 6-foot seas. Northeast 25 knots for Kamishak Bay. Lighter winds out of the north for Northern Cook Inlet at 15 knots. And for Saturday, those winds pick up. North 30 knots, Northern Cook Inlet. Gale warnings south of the Forelands. Cold north winds, 35 knots, 8-foot seas, and a heavy freezing spray with storm force northwest winds for Kamishak Bay across the Barren Islands, 50 to 55 knots, seas 16 to 20 feet. Gale warnings for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 35 knots out of the north with much higher gusts coming out of the Copper River Delta, and north 25 with higher gusts for Prince William Sound. And Kodiak Island for Friday, west winds, west-southwest winds, 20 to 25 knots. Gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula Pacific side, southwest 35 knots, Bering Sea side, northwest at 35. Bristol Bay, south winds 20 knots. And for Saturday, big increase in the winds. You can see hurricane force wind warning from Sitka to Castle Cape, northwest 65 knots. Storm warnings Kodiak Island, northwest 45 to 55 knots with higher gusts, and 40 to 45 knot winds for the Alaska Peninsula from the north-northwest. And Bristol Bay, northwest winds 40 knots. Heavy freezing spray expected in all these marine areas. And for the Fox Islands, gale warnings tomorrow. North to west winds 35 to 45 knots. Gale warnings for Adak and Atka. Northwest 45 knots. West 35 knots for Amchitka Island. And then south winds 35 knots. Kiska to Shemya. Storm warnings from Shemya to Kiska. Front coming in should possibly kick the winds up to 55 knots out of the southeast. That'd be more over toward to Attu Island, with seas building up to 34 feet. Southeast winds 40 knots Amchitka Island. Southeast 30 knots Adak and Atka. Unamak Island, east 20 to 25 knots. Unalaska Island, gale warnings, north 35. Southwest coast tomorrow, gale warnings, north winds 35 to 40 knots. Out over the Bering Sea, north winds 40 knots, including the Pribilofs. Gale warning St. Lawrence Island, north at 35. And then for the day Saturday, New Year's Day, north 30 to 40 knot winds for the southwest coast, northeast at 20 for the Pribilofs, seas down to 8 feet, and brisk wind advisory St. Lawrence Island, north winds 25 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west-northwest 10 to 20 knots, light north winds at 10 knots for the central coast, 15 knots out of the north on the west side. Brisk wind advisories Cape Beaufort to Wales, north to northeast winds at 25 knots. Saturday, brisk wind advisories Wales to Cape Thompson, northwest 25 knots. Otherwise, the remainder of the Arctic coast, north to northwest at 15, except over toward Barter Island to Demarcation Point, west 25 knots. For tonight, low pressure slides just south of the North Gulf Coast. That'll increase the moisture, nudge some moisture northward, rain along the coast, snow inland areas or with any elevation, and storm out over the Bering Sea pulls eastward. Low in the Gulf of Alaska tomorrow, look for rain and snow to push into the Panhandle. And Saturday, cold and windy over the southeast part of the state.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.